tokens of their esteem. So he's talking about bribery, along with lots of presents to Dick Clark for all his marvelous assistance in the crusade to jam these products down the kids' throats. So here's Frank. At first they were trying to stop it. Now they can't stop it, so they're going to translate it back into visual space by making cash out of it. Yes, ... Pat Boone was notable, too, for his humanistic activities. In brackets, bleaching Little Richard and making him safe for teenage consumption. So we're going to read this again. The visor men cranked out phony white rock. Highly skilled couriers then delivered the goods to American Bandstand along with lots of presents, tokens of their esteem, to Dick Clark for all his marvelous assistance in the crusade to jam these products down the kids' throats. Now, Dick Clark is still prominent. American Bandstand is still happening in '68. I wonder if he thought about suing Zappa. ... Pat Boone was notable, too, for his humanistic activities. In brackets, bleaching Little Richard and making him safe for teenage consumption. Do you know who Pat Boone is, Roxy? Ever heard of him?
No.
He was a pretty boy in the late 50s who would cover all the black hits. The black records that were hits in the black radio stations. Then you had Chuck Berry and Little Richard started to cross over, and the white kids would hear Little Richard, but they would buy, and then immediately Pat Boone would take a Little Richard song and do his version of it, a nice cleaned up, silly version, and then he would sell more to the white kids than Little Richard would. This went on for several years. They blatantly ripped off the black records.
Damn.
But just, did you know that, Bert?
No, I did not know that. I'm learning that.
The Black Caucus is going to be pissed off. When they hear this show tonight, there's going to be, Al Sharp is going to come in. He's going to be, what? I didn't know that.
I mean, I heard that about Elvis Presley, but I didn't know that about Pat Boone. That's what's, I mean, there was always the joke about Elvis Presley, but I didn't know Pat Boone. That's interesting, Frank's breakdown of that. That's
right. Well, Dina Weinstein talks about this in her book. It's interesting. I read this book in time for this history. She lists off like 5 songs Little Richard made, Chuck Berry, and they did these different songs. They sold a little bit because they crossed over. They were the first, white consumption rock and roll, along with Bill Haley. But then immediately Pat Boone would make the same fucking song with a cleaned up surface silliness, and he would sell 3 times what Little Richard made.
Wow.
And, it's interesting warfare. It was a race warfare. Pat Boone goes on to become a very conservative supporter of Ronald Reagan. It's like he came out of Orange County. I'm not sure, but that world. And they made sure they got their guy in there. And they didn't care. Why did they give some of the money to Little Richard? They just didn't care, apparently, as far as I know about it. So that's pretty blatant ripoff, eh? And remember, the blacks were considered inferior. They weren't even allowed to be part of society, so it was no problem stealing from these animals, right? These are just animals. We can take their stuff and make it better. We're going to make it better. It should be cleaner. We need more brushes, less drumstick. But this is actually going to cause the civil rights. Now, Dina Weinstein, as a sociologist, points out that actually the hidden environmental effect was that the white kids started to get the black music eventually. The covers, they faded out after a few years or something because the kids got more access to the black music, and then they started being black, and so there's no more racism on the kid level. At least on a general level. There still were assholes, like the guys who beat up Frank for having blacks in his band in 1957, right?
Yeah.
But the world was going to be made one big mosh pit. Okay. So then Zappa says, one of my favorite Negro, and this is in 1968, black power just becomes a term in the media about 68, 69. Definitely the African Americans not in. So it was normal. You see it in McLuhan's writings. You called them Negroes. Do you guys ever call yourself Negro, Bert?
When I was younger, yes. Younger.
And then you dropped it? Did you drop it?
Well, it was just the whole, we call it systematic indoctrination when I was younger, because I grew up in the 60s. I was young in the 60s, but I remember that because my grandparents from earlier in the 60s used to refer it as color, and then in the 60s referred as Negro, and then later in the 70s became black. So it went from colored, Negro, to black.
All right, but you one day they didn't tall you. What, Roxy? What
in other languages, the word Negro is still used. For example, in Spanish.
Oh yeah.
There was this change that happened in America didn't occur in other languages, in French, in German, and Spanish.
It's still called Negro today.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so Bert, you didn't constantly get told, okay, don't use that word Negro, we're going to use black. You didn't get told that, did you?
No, not get told that, but that was like the programming from the radio and the television where, and, you know, whatever, church and things where they started to change it that way and just the basic dialogues. Yes. And
what year were you born? 61? 64?
59.
Oh, 59. So your teens, late, before teens, preteen, and that is when this is changing, and you're going to absorb it as a kid.
Yes.
Okay, so Zappa says, one of my favorite Negro and groups, no, there should be no and sign in there. One of my favorite Negro groups during the 50s was Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. Their work was some of the most important socio-sexual, true-to-life commentary of that era. For instance, and he names a song, Stingy Little Thing. There's the thing. There it is. Stingy Little Thing, in brackets, a song in protest about girls who wouldn't put out in quotes, wouldn't have sex. He goes, Stingy Little Thing, Work With Me, Annie, and Annie Had a Baby. He names these 3 songs. Songs like these got played on the air every once in a while. The kids would hear Annie Had a Baby and say, hey, quote, hey, here's a song about a girl getting pregnant, unquote, and rush to tune it in. You know, it was like the forbidden. But an official, so they would hear it occasionally and rush to tune in. But an official of the station, in brackets, with teenage children of his own to protect, close bracket, would, quote, lay a pink memo on it, unquote, and the song would sort of disappear in quotes. The visor men, meanwhile, were magically purifying all this stuff. Work with me, Annie. Here's the actual lyrics. Please don't cheat. Give me all my meat. That's in brackets, quoted. Work with me, Annie, through the wisdom of their craft, became Dance with me, Henry. I heard it click. Are you guys still there, or I'm still there. Okay.
We're here.
So Work With Me, Annie became Dance With Me, Henry, and the lyrics went from Please Don't Cheat, Give Me All My Meat, became If You Want Romancin', You Better Learn Some Dancin'. So that was the meme war, the cultural meme war caused by this new radio environment, which was caused by television usurping the role of radio. So radio became a ghetto where they put the teen music in. Right? This is a side effect of television.
Yeah. Wow.
A war in the older media. All right, so shall we continue? Shall we do something else?
Sure.
Continue. Yes, okay. And maybe the thing that we lost our identity with the electric environment, and even you became a black woman, sort of help to integrate, help.
I missed the first part. What did you say? Do it again. I didn't get it really what you're saying. Did something?
Yes, that with the electronic environment we lost our identity. Yeah. But in a way I think that helped for the integration of different ethnicities.
Yeah, are you saying, it sounds like you said it stopped,
even you,
but you didn't say it.
Even you became a black woman.
Yes, I adapted immediately. I knew where the bucks were. I knew where the money was going. I had a green visor. I just pretended I didn't know what it meant. I was one of the original guys. I think I sold the green visors to the Little Wrecking Crew. I think I came up with it, marketed them. Another bunch of $1 million I made. And we had Cuban cigars back then, before 1959, when Castro fucked things up and ruined the cigar market. But we had them in the 50s. So you say, now this is the integration, Roxy. Yes, of course, the population was being made discarnate. But in was coming the digital media, which was going to recreate pyramidal hierarchies, and the integration stuff was dropped by 1980. Even though people worked and lived in integrated offices and all that, socially the blacks were being ostracized, and there was war with the Puerto Ricans and other people, other groups. It was just chaos in America because digital media could retrieve your private literate self, pseudo-literate self. So you had all the parents sending their kids to private schools. Are you there, guys?
Yes.
What's happening? The fragmentation. So there was co-anesthesia, integration happening on the chemical body, but electronic and digital media were going to cause more synesthesic fragmentation. Culturally, racially, politically correctness, all this stuff started happening. Political correctness is the attempt of co-anesthesia to create a patina of unity, of integration, but more and more society is really fragmenting. All right? So there was a patina of integration for a few minutes, but later technologies undermined that. Now you have the kids on Web 2.0, the rumors are that they don't even notice a chemical body. Right? So they have these raves, or what was that called? That kind of dancing where everybody get together and bounce to that guy. We used to play his music, Testeroni or Testo or somebody. Tiesto. And everybody, Eben told me the value is that everybody loves everybody, regardless of race. That's part of the celebration in these post-rave raves, whatever they're called. You know about them?
No.
What?
Now we know.
Yeah,
now we know.
Okay. Yeah. Bob, the man with the little green visor documenting the changes in society. Okay, so I'm going to, we're going to stop. Roxy's only got half an hour left. So why don't we'll continue this awesome article. I think we've proven we don't need to read anymore to prove our point, but we will read more next week to find more points. The upcoming chapters are
quite interesting,
what?
Really.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
Yeah, very.
Yeah. I totally forgot about it. And so after Green Visors, the next section is called Vaseline. Then after that, 72 tracks and Itchy-Coo Park. That was a famous song in '68, Itchy-Coo Park. 72 tracks and Itchy-Coo Park, digression number 3. Then he has audience education. Then the Jimi Hendrix phenomenon. And, here it is. The gas company, the electric company, and the music company. Digression number 4. Now, there he is talking about the medium. Wow. The gas company, the electric company, and the music company. Amazing. Pretty neat, eh?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's better to say all this rather than write out a book. Imagine typing all this out. And you can't even say as much as you can verbally. So what?
Yes, and McLuhan was also exploring all these corporations' identities, how we replace the individual that was so important during the Gutenberg Galaxy with these groups, these new tribes like the corporations, the football team, and
right. The group mind, and And you see a lot of that in Cultures Are Business that you were referring to. The ads,
yes.
right, show that trend change. Yeah. Okay.
It's very interesting how McLuhan always says he was just exploring. And in video I sent it you, Gail Zappa, she's in the Biennale de Venezia, and she says Zappa always said he was just exploring, and he went out to explore and came back to report. So they were doing the same thing.
They're doing the same thing. They were journalists.
Yeah.
Now, who said? Did you say Gail Zappa said this? Who said that?
Yes, I sent you the video. It's on your mail.
Just now, an interview with Gail.
Yes,
Zappa
most of it it's in Italian, but she says Zappa always said he was just exploring and he came back to report.
Wow, isn't that amazing? And he was saying that he didn't know much about McLuhan, but he was saying the same. McLuhan always said, I don't explain, I explore. And here's Frank saying the same thing. It's pretty interesting. Maybe every one of the people on my Android meme chart, like Croker, Thompson, McLuhan, Garrett, LaRouche, maybe they're all the same fucking thing. They're just variations of the same attitude, the same study.
Like I don't say the same tribe.
Yes, the people who are not. They're all expressing Bob's. Now, I knew all this from my Secret Council 10 work, so they're all chips off of me. They're all tempting to be me. I'm trying to be like Bob. I'm just exploring. He works for solar government. He gets paid to do this, but I'm going to try to do some music about it.
And another thing, they both always say that they were not specialists, that they were just generalists, and they were also somehow autodidactic in their prose.
Right. Now, that's a good point. He's writing this article as if he's been out there, he's researched it, and he's reporting back. All he had to do was talk to his manager and Hal Zeiger, who dropped over every other day anyway. So he did research, but not even leaving home. He just talked to his friends, and they gave him the facts. And he makes his clinical technical report in Life magazine. It's like a lab report.
What's interesting in Frank is that he was considered a juvenile delinquent, but he really turned everything over. I mean, he was a juvenile delinquent technically by the standards of society, but he really educated himself and became a monster. I mean, really a big monster to be able to point the finger at everything that what he was sensing with the electricity and the whole music industry. I think the commercial, he was really fast. I was listening this week and reading what flamed him so much was ignorance and stupidity and the commercialism of music. How the commercialist music just took everything away, and he sort of was pissed off. I mean, he said at one time that a lot of his inspiration came through things he hated. And that kind of makes me think of what I heard or something in McLuhan, that the McLuhan
said
was
the same
pointing
thing.
out. Yes.
Hey, what are you trying to remember? McLuhan
he talked about he's against.
He said, if I talk about something, you can be sure I'm against it.
Yeah, that's it.
And so they were like patriotic citizens and educators. And remember, Zappa's also thinking of running for president. He's going to get Tom Wilson to run for president in 1968. There's an election going on, and he's going to form the Interested Party. So here's Frank talking like an advisor to a president. He's talking maturely, you know. This is what our society is. These are the issues before us today. But what was that about? He being against something. He's really, as a proper music teacher, he doesn't like the way society is ruining the aesthetic art form. He really values the ears, and that's a valid therapy or a valid role.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he was an agent of the Android meme, and the Android meme wasn't going to wait for anybody. So Frank was duped by the Android meme, or some part of Frank was. Just as McLuhan was, and Paul, they all were, Paul Krasner, everybody. They all were duped. They couldn't see coldly like a solar government agent could see. We operated very coldly. We looked over the planet every day. We did not try to save species. Matter of fact, Ion, we're not here to help you. We're just here for the ascendant.
We're just here to make fun of you.
Yeah, that was Frank and McLuhan. Pretty close to that attitude. Okay, I want to just read. Let's read another name, more names on the Zappa album, Freak Out album, the names that made Frank super intelligent. Number 23 is Joe Pauley. They say unknown personage, probably a personal friend of Frank Zappa, Joe Pauley. We don't know that. Don and Dewey, R&B duo whom Frank Zappa used to see perform at the El Monte Legion Stadium. They recorded a number of classic R&B singles for the specialty label. Violinist Don, so Don and Dewey, but Don was a violinist. Violinist Don Sugarcane Harris went on to record and perform with Frank in 69 and 70. Isn't that neat? He used to see these guys when he was a teenager, and he remembered them and brought them into his band, 15 years later. And then Don Sugarcane Harris became famous, and he became a member of the Jefferson Airplane after playing with Frank for a while. So Frank retrieved and saved the guy. Lee Zagon, personal friend of Frank Zappa. So they know Lee Zagon, Z-A-G-O-N, is a personal friend. No other information is known. He's probably one of the guys he played Ionization to, and the guy liked it, so he gets honored for liking Varese. Right?
Yeah.
Steve Mann, Los Angeles-based blues guitarist. Steve Mann, Los Angeles-based blues guitarist, briefly joined the Mothers in 1966. So they were called the Mothers in 66. Skip Diamond, Los Angeles-based musician, likely a personal friend of Frank Zappa and the Mothers. He recorded backing vocals for the Hallelujah album by Canned Heat, featuring ex-mother Henry Vesting. I think it was Henry Vesting that Frank lived with in Laurel Canyon before he moved in with Susie Cream Cheese, Pamela Zarubica. So he left the Mothers and did the backing vocals for a song by Canned Heat. And it was in the band. I mean, he probably did more than that. Now here comes a nod to the House of Mexico. Sylvester Revueltas. That's who.
Revueltas.
Revueltas. And did you ever meet him?
Yes. No, but
how's that?
The whole family was very artistic. The sister was an actress here in Berlin by the Berliner Ensemble, and there was the other brother was a very important writer, but he was in jail because he was into revolution and this very radical. So he was in prison.
That would be in the 60s? You're talking about the 60s and 70s?
Yeah, 50s, 60s, yeah.
Right. But, so how is Sylvester still alive? Are these older people?
No, those are like from the time of Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera. Like in the 40s.
That's a long time ago. So they were born in the 30s or something, or no? These people. Yes, they were born the same year as McLuhan. They're McLuhan's generation, 1911.
The thing with the music of Sylvester Revueltas, he was into this nationalist style. That was something that was going on everywhere in the world. Most composers were retrieving traditional folk music scales and songs and making a cover of that in a more symphonic way. And yeah,
okay.
You can play some of his music.
Right. So that was the. In the 19th century, they started going around. It's the beginning of merging lowbrow and highbrow. They were looking for rhythms and themes in folk music, right?
Yes, and because that was a time in Mexico where artists thought they have to educate the people too, and they have to, like, the muralists were going to show the history to the people, and the artists were telling the non-Europeans that their culture is also as important and valuable as the European culture. And yeah, like we talk about how the high culture and the low culture, the popular culture, somehow melted. There was also this melting between the industrial European culture and the ethnic,
agricultural,
national, the tribal culture.
Right.
Many different cultures.
That would be caused by the telegraph. That would be the beginning of breaking down visual space. So the guys would be attracted to oral culture. They start to get this oral retrieval with the telegraph. Because Sylvester...
First there was this nationalism, like with the Nazis. Everybody became nationalist at the beginning with the radio.
Yes. And who did you say? Onassis? What was the name you said?
The Nazis. The German...
Oh, the Nazis. Yeah. Nazis. Right. Well, guess what? Sylvester Revueltas, born in 1899, and he only lasted 41 years. He died in 1940. So you didn't meet him, but they list siblings. Jose, Fairman, Rosura, and Consuelo. Are you saying you met some of those?
No, but they were very well known as artists, but they were more like very radical socialists.
Yeah, like Rivera. What's his name?
No, I think even more than that, because Rivera worked for Rockefeller, and he was just being quadrophenic. He said he was communist, but he was working for Rockefeller and for making big murals for Ford and all this big capital.
Okay, so did you meet personally any of the Revueltas family?
No.
Okay, I thought you said you did, so you didn't. So here's Zappa listing the guy. And it says, Mexican composer and violinist, one of the more obscure influences on Frank Zappa. So that's pretty neat. Arnold Schoenberg, Austrian composer. His pioneering experiments in, among other forms, atonality were hugely influential on a number of similarly forward-thinking modernist composers who followed in Schoenberg's wake, including Anton Webern and Frank Zappa. Then there's Joe Perino, keyboardist and one-time member of Frank Zappa's high school R&B group, The Blackouts. Later leader of a lounge band, Joe Perino and the Mellotones, who Zappa was a member of in 1961 and 62. And Jerry Uhlberg, another one of Frank Zappa's English teachers at Antelope Valley High School, was somehow coerced into performing on an unreleased Zappa Don Van Vliet track called, quote, The Search for Tom Dooley. There was a famous song around 1960 called Tom Dooley, I think. I think he disappeared in the jungles. He was a missionary or something. So this teacher, Jerry Uhlberg, was coerced into performing with Frank and Don on The Search for Tom Dooley. Then, 32, Donna number 1, unknown personage. The placement of this name in the list gives no hint as to who this Donna may have been. In brackets, the list is generally fairly logical if you think about it. Donna number 2, another unknown personage. Wonder if these Donnas knew they had been mentioned on the cover of a major rock album release. Then the writer says, however, I digress. So yes, do they know? Loeb and Leopold. They were infamous murderers. Not saying murderers, infamous murders. Oh, I guess the murders that they were associated with. They were convicted for the murder of a 14-year-old boy, an act committed for no reason other than to commit the perfect crime. Also, the name of Frank Zappa and Ray Collins' semi-folk duo act they performed at the Troubadour in L.A. in the early 1960s. So they did Loeb and Leopold. I can't remember. I think they were framed. They were anarchists. They got framed for just like Frank got framed. And then the other frame up, he's got Loeb and Leopold. So this is logical. Sacco and Fanzetti. They were Italian immigrants who, in one of the most outrageously and willfully mishandled cases in United States history, were convicted of a pair of murders which they did not commit, despite overwhelming evidence attesting to their innocence, and even the confession of a man who claimed he was the actual killer. The pair was later executed for the crime. It is easy to see why, even on a much smaller scale, Frank Zappa might have been able to sympathize with their story, having also endured a miscarriage of justice the year before in Cucamonga. Let me just see if Leopold Loban.
I have to get ready.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and enjoy.
Yeah. So we got up to number 35, and that's good. And you made great contributions, and we appreciate your ongoing participation. I'm sorry you're being coerced to do this, but I need the money.
Yeah, we're here for the culture.
Yeah, for the culture. And maybe there'll be Ian next week.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Ian shows up. I don't know when we're going to do this.
Well, it doesn't matter. We'll do it when we can.
Yeah, when we can. Okay. Bert and I will go into other matters. We'll see let me see anybody listening. So thanks a lot.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Geez, Bert's not even here. Where's Bert? I'm all by myself. Well, there's Sean. Do you want to say something, Sean? Bert got knocked out. Did I get knocked out? I'm putting in Loeb and Leopold. Let's see. Were they framed? Still looking it up. Leopold and Loeb trial. Okay, so they were two wealthy students at the University of Chicago who in May 1924 kidnapped and murdered. So I guess they did it. They committed the murder, widely characterized at the time as a crime of the century, as a demonstration of their perceived intellectual superiority, which they thought rendered them capable of carrying out a perfect crime and absolved them of responsibility for their actions. After the men were arrested, the parents retained Clarence Darrow. He went on and did the evolution trial, or had already done it, I don't know, as counsel for the defense. Darrow's 12-hour-long summation at their sentencing hearing is noted for its influential criticism of capital punishment as retributive rather than transformative justice. Both men were sentenced to life imprisonment plus 99 years. Loeb was killed by a fellow prisoner in 1936, and this all happened in 24-25. Leopold was released on parole in 1958. The murder of the kid, the kid's Bob Frank, combination of me. Robert Franks, Bob Franks. The murder of Franks has been the inspiration for several works in film, theater, and literature, such as the 1929 play Rope by Patrick Hamilton, and Alfred Hitchcock's adaptation of the play in the 1948 film of the same name. Later movies such as Compulsion and Swoon were also based on the crime. So, Frank, he's killing people. Frank considers his art, his attempt to become president of the United States, as the perfect crime. That must be the meaning for bringing them in. Bert, you're back, Bert?
Yes.
Well, how much did you miss?
Probably missed about 5 minutes. Had a problem with Skype getting back on.
Okay. So, I need to take a drink, so I'm going to play a little music for a minute, and we'll figure out what we're going to do next. Did you hear that? Loeb and Leopold, they did murder the kid, trying to do the perfect crime, why would Frank list them? He's got Sankow and Vanzetti. They were framed. That's known, I guess. So then Leopold and Loeb, they represent Frank attempting the perfect crime, becoming president of the United States through infiltrating youth culture. So he's killing, and the kid that was killed was Robert Franks. That's Bob Frank. That's me. Combination of us. But it's like Frank knows he's killing the 14-year-old if they start to be interested in Frank's world. Socially killing them. There's the metaphor. They'll become alienated outsiders by hanging out with Frank. So let's play. Well, Bert, just you and me, Bob.
That was awesome.
Wasn't that awesome?
Man.
Over an hour of iodized music. Let me read you some of the reviews. Did you look at the chat?
Yeah, I saw it. Andrew, Pamela, and 94.94.
Mateo was back there. Liz, that's where I stopped reading. I have to go back there. First of all, is that Andrew HK? Is that Legends friend Andrew?
Yes.
Guy's been absent for about a year. Wonder why he's back. Why don't you call in, Andrew? See what's up with you, man?
I was thinking the same. You should call in.
Yeah. You haven't got Ian here to make fun of you. We'll be softer. We'll be gentler. So what you have here is way back there. We were talking about augmenter, copy, right, copyright. And Andrew says, art was hypnosis and death. Now all our art of the living dead. So that's not bad. It's an opening statement. It needs more elaboration. You don't want to stay stuck on the word art. Now all our art, because after art comes archetype. And then the last word gets recycled. E-Truth says, hi all. And Andrew says, media seeks to speak to. Social media seeks to speak at. Yeah? Yeah, media seek to speak to. Social media seeks to speak at. Yeah, it's okay. Robert, thunderous activity trickling in the humble media bowl of Agatha Christie's. Thunderous activity trickling in the humble media bowl of Agatha Christie's. I guess Agatha Christie is a detective, right? So, process looking who did the perfect crime. And then Liz says, good evening. Mateo says, what does it mean when you experience Portal, still alive, YouTube song, purchase Xbox 360 game, play a few levels, and then a few hours later, Ian requests Bob to play the song on Payday? Does it mean that Ian knows what you're doing, Mateo? What does it mean when you experience Portal, still alive, YouTube song, purchase Xbox 360 game, play a few levels? I guess he was just doing that. And then a few hours later, Ian requests Bob to play the song on Payday. Well, we were talking about the word portal, and you could claim you evoked that, Mateo, and then Ian wanted to send in its use of the word Mateo. So it's 50-50 whether Ian's addressing you or not. Pamela says, when you search through a cardboard box of papers from Web 1.0 in the garage and find a corner of a page that reads 1111 and subsequently mentions Bob, LOL. So I guess that happened to her. When you search through a cardboard box of pages from Web 1.0 in the garage and find a corner of a page that reads 1111 and subsequently mentions Bob. And she says, from 2004. Andrew says, Mary Joan Wana. It's not just a lesbian, gay, B happening. LGB, is that lesbian, gay, something? Andrew says, Orson O. Welles and FDR Flores conspire to reform the tax code. Soundtrack to the movie. Then 94 says, great Zappa set, Bob. And then it says, Black Lives Matter, Bob. And then Andrew says, true, I'm hanging. No, 94 says, I got your language hanging, boy. Then Andrew says, true, I'm hanging in there by a thread. Andrew says, 94 says, yeah, this is balls to the wall. Let's see where you go from here. I guess he meant that one song. Or did he mean the whole set up to that point? Anyways, I then played something, and he said, nice antidote. Then Andrew says, some of the best toe happening, some of the best toe tapping. Then 94 says, look, Ma, Bob is playing the radio. And he says, Bob's preferred musical instrument. And he says, Ma is mighty impressed. Then he says, by the way, Ma, all harmonic climates are being/have been subsumed by ion and the new environment, leaving Bob with the initial climate of the fall, a mixtape of what happened after the fall, and a manual for getting back to God. Yes, that's not bad, Bert. What do you think? I'm providing the initial climate of the fall, a mixtape of what happened after the fall, and a manual for getting back to God. Yes. That's what I was doing. I used to do that. Now we've arrived. We don't have to do it anymore. Then he said, Andrew says, here we call that a manual of labor. May your garden bloom forever, Bob. Then Pamela says, thanks, Bob. Ion Carolyn. Then 94 says, the eye cell garden. I say, I like that. Ionized. Pamela goes, yeah. Maybe to the music, I'm not sure. Andrew says, St. E. Claus's gift is appreciated. Santa Claus, Santa E. St. E. Claus's gift. Yes, maybe Ian was saying Santa Claus rather than Santa Claus. We didn't ask him to spell it. But he did list the characteristics, like watching the list of Who's Naughty Night. That's Santa Claus stuff. Then I tell Pamela I'm looking at her pictures she sent me. Sent them earlier in the day or something. I just got around now. She goes, and? I put on an embarrassed face. Then I said, no. She goes, and? She puts on an embarrassed face. Then I say, still assessing. She looks sad. Then she looks happy. Then she winks. No, then I wink. So she's sad and then embarrassed. I guess that's the embarrassed icon. And then I wink. Then 94 says, good night, Melbourne. Why, was that the Melbourne? Is that where it was done, 94? Melbourne? Stairway to Heaven? And then Pamela says, hilarious, 94. And then Pamela says, it's the festive season. And Sherry in New York says, great Zappa's music, Bob. Great DJ Bob, like always. With a smiley. And that's where we stand. The votes are still coming in, but it looks like Bob has got the majority locked up. It's a matter if they'll even be in opposition now. Right?
Yes.
So, Bert, what issues do you want to discuss before we go to the rewrite?
Bob, I was reading the Mother of All Interviews.
Bert. Just a minute. Is that me? No. Okay, that's me. I'm just thinking, is there someone else here? No. Okay, yeah, you're just reading what?
Mother of All Interviews. And the interviewer was asking Frank about how he appeared to be a mentor of all young foster unknown people's careers. And Frank mentions that it has something to do with fractals. Have you ever heard of that? His wrenches of fractals?
No, he had,
I'll read it.
Yeah, I've never heard him talk about fractals. He's mentioned isotopes, but I don't know about fractals. And is the Mother of All Interviews Eric somebody and another guy? It's like just after mine. Maybe 89, 90.
It's Don Mean. Don Mean.
Oh, yeah, that's a guitar magazine or something. Yeah, that's a professional interview. Okay, I have that. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I could look it up. Do you want me to check it out and look at it at the same time as you?
Yes, because it's quite interesting because Frank goes on to describe about his use of polyrhythmic subdivisions. And that reminds him of Fractals.
Okay, Den Sims. What year would this be? In the 80s?
1994.
Oh, it's after he died. Geez, they don't have it listed on this site.
From a definitive tribute to Frank Zappa, best guitar player in 1994.
The last days of Frank Zappa. Yeah, unfortunately they don't have the top of the page. Okay, so I have to go to another site. Do you have the link? Do you want to send me the link?
Let's see if I find it, because I've copied it into a Word document. I'll find the link. Hold on.
I think we can actually read the Uncle Meat Bulletin. I have it here. This one site has it. The Uncle Meat story. But maybe I have to wait until next week. So I'm looking through. Be called the mother, maybe under M. No.
I'll send you a link, Bob. I found it.
Okay.
Part 1.
Says the other pattern, perhaps. Zappa is still alive, especially on Payday. The other pattern, perhaps. So what's Mateo referring to? Is he talking about himself? What does it mean when you experience, okay, it means the other pattern, the other world, the other pattern, perhaps. Zappa is still alive, especially on Payday. Yes. Are you sending it to the chat line, Bert, or
I can post in the chat. I sent it to Ion. I sent it to your Ion email, but I can post it on the chat as well.
Roxana posted on maybe on her Facebook, but on my Facebook too. She has a little, the little bulbs they put on trees, Christmas tree bulb.
Yeah.
And she says, ho, ho, ho. It says it has a beard, his Zappa's mustache and goatee or whatever, and then it says Zappa on this Christmas tree bulb. And she goes, ho, 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 get ready for the thunders. I'm so happy I could cry. That's the kind of people who post on my Facebook. My Facebook? Yeah, I'm not fooled by Android me, right? Trying to tell me. You mean to tell me I have a Facebook page? All right, there it is. Okay, so put in the word. What was the word?
Fractals.
Fractals. So, please just go up before. German, the kind of laughs he gave us are German laughs. About the Ensemble Moderne, I think. Some woman had a great time hanging out with him. So then he says, gave them all these opportunities. You have a reputation for being a mentor of the young and or foster of unknown people's careers. How did that happen? I think there probably something to do with fractals. The more I think about fractals, the more the whole idea of fractals relates closely to what I do. Well, I was explaining the fractal earlier, many hours ago. Somebody posted the Bob head. Yeah, the J.R. Bob Dobbs head on my site, or on the Facebook. And so it's got the traditional Dobbs face. So then it's made up of all these little dots. So you go into the dots, and they become little Bob Dobbs heads. So the big head is made up of the little ones. So I explained how that was the interplay of co-anesthesia and synesthesia. Co-anesthesia being the integrated tendency toward a centralized icon. So that's the image you first see. But then it fragments, decentralizes into micro bob heads. So Frank, his work is one big album. You get all these little reflections of the big album as separate parts inside the fractal. So we could agree with that. So the guy goes, how so? Now, did you want to read something about this, or we just read it?
You can read it. Go ahead.
The guy says, how so? Well, if you're trying to define order out of chaos, that's a little bit presumptuous. But then on the other hand, so is the concept of chaos. So I would say that the fractal theory falls in the cracks between those two attitudes, right? That's right. It's tactility. It's the interplay between synesthesia and co-anesthesia. And rhythmically, if you're dividing the universe into twos and threes, which is basically what happens with all polyrhythmic subdivisions, you are to some degree missing the boat, the fractal boat. If you can think of rhythm as an extension of the fractal universe instead of even subdivisions of twos and threes grouped into 11s and 13s or whatever, if you can think of microsecond relationships as being valid components of polyrhythms, then you're getting closer to the way I view things. This is good. This is probably an explaining digital dust. Never saw this. Well, I read this, 20 years ago, but have not reread it. And if you can, transferring that into the anthropological domain, how I wound up being, in your words, a mentor to these kinds of people, it just seems that the odds are in my favor that if I keep doing what I'm doing, we will meet. Yeah, that's true. That's Dobbs sound talk. So then the guy says, you made the comment that listeners accept polyrhythms in their music and African drum music with much greater ease than they do dissonance. Why is it that harmony seems to linger around so much? And Frank says, rap music may bring an end to that. Think about it. What is so precariously consonant about spoken words? It used to be, in order to have something acceptable as broadcast material or even listenable material, it had to be saturated with consonants. And although rap music is not dealing with harmonic combinations of major and minor seconds, it is certainly dealing in dissonance. The guy says, that's true. You've done a lot with spoken material, too, such as that thing with Steve Vai tracking your voice. Zappa says, oh, yes, on Dangerous Kitchen. Yeah, well, where he wrote I'd have to call it a scat because there's no other word for it. It's on that Jazz Discharge Party Hats. It's on that and that Jazz Discharge Party Hats. He transcribed it and then learned it on the guitar, then played it on the record. But I think that the other better example of spoken material would be something like Dumb All Over. Why is it okay to hear really strange rhythms but not to hear really strange harmonies? Well, arguing the other position, people do assimilate really strange harmonies when they are accompanied by the appropriate image. Do you mean like in horror movie music when the maniacal slasher is about to come? Zappa says exactly. The other guy says, it's got to be visually triggered. Well, says Frank, the society has been so saturated with visual data, and the audio that goes along with those pictures stays in your tissue, kind of like dioxin. And you hear the slasher music, you know what slasher texture is. You know slasher harmony. And if you hear anything that sounds like slasher harmony and there's no slasher, you're still going to feel the slasher. So the interviewer says, then the question becomes, have the visual media people created the proper image to go with the sound? Frank says, well, if I were going to do a slasher movie, I could be a lot scarier than the shit that they stick in there. I thought that the pinnacle, the thing that everybody has gone for since it was established as a slasher norm, was the squeak, squeak, squeak from Psycho. Most film scoring for tense moments runs a gamut from squeak, squeak, squeak to the filter opening up on the mini-moog on the low note. Not much in between there. The guy then says, how do you think Schubert would feel knowing that the unfinished symphony is the Smurfs theme? Well, how do you think that the people in America would feel if they knew where the Smurfs came from? They were an advertising device for British Petroleum. When we went to Holland for the first time with the band with Mark and Howard in 70 or 71, the whole place was riddled with fucking Smurfs advertising British Petroleum. And the joke in the band was Smurf me, because on the billboards that's what they said, Smurf me, spelled M-E-E-E. I don't know what it means, but to go from that to what we now have is a family of Smurfs with their own personalities. According to Ahmed, who saw the spectacle on television, he witnessed an interview with a guy who was one of the Smurf voices, taking himself so seriously that it beggared description. I mean, he did about a 5-minute routine on this guy. His son Ahmed did. Then the interviewer says, there's our cultural hero. And again, it gets me back thinking of guitar heroes and why they are gunslingers. In your touring days with rock bands, did you see guys out there playing air guitar? Sure. What is that? How come girls don't do it? Well, because their tits get in the way, for one thing. Same reason why you don't see that many girl guitar players unless they're handling it at a low altitude. But I think it's probably because girls are too smart to play air guitar. If ever there was something that the women's liberation movement could use to prove the inferiority of the male species, it's the extremely low number of women who play air guitar. I resemble that remark. I'm a professional air guitarist and proud of the talent. Again, Frank's been hanging out in his library too long. Let's see. We haven't talked about your business. As I understand it, you and Gail handle everything. In the house, we have 3 offices. We've got one upstairs in the bedroom where I do all the liner notes and that kind of word processing stuff. Gail has an office, and then there's another office just you come in the gate that we use for all the phone transactions and that kind of stuff. We have a lab, we have a studio, we have an editing facility, 3 vaults for tape and film. That's all right there. That's all right here where we live. There's 2 other buildings in the San Fernando Valley. One of them is Joe's Garage, which is a rehearsal facility. And then there's our warehouse where all the equipment stuff comes out of. Gail runs all that. Why did you decide to handle all these things yourselves? Well, I would say there's a certain hose job factor in there, but in reality it's just good business sense. What's the hose job factor? They got hosed? Nobody else would help them?
Well,
maybe.
From what I know of hose job, it's sort of like somebody uses you. So it's like a hose job.
Well, he'd get used if he used someone else, is what he's saying. Be more expensive, probably. What's in that huge vault downstairs? Frank says, since the early 70s, I've collected every interview, every performance clip, everything that was done around the world that I could get a copy of. Then there's all the rest of the footage from Baby Snakes, the movie The Baby Snakes, or Baby Snakes, the accounts of every documentary that was done in Europe and every place else, and then there's videotape, every format from 2-inch to digital video, and all stops in between, plus all the masters, all the road tapes, and all the 1/4-inch tapes from Cucamonga. That's way back there. The audio tapes go back to 55. Wow. That's pretty amazing. So early on, you were careful about keeping things and keeping them in order. Well, being a pack rat is something, but keeping it in order is another thing. In other words, it's a hellacious chore for someone. Frank says, well, the vault is very well organized, and I know where stuff is, but nobody else does. In order to put it in a condition where anybody could go in there and find anything anytime they needed it, it would take about a year and a barcode generator. Even a student intern wouldn't know what the fuck to do with it, because many of the road tapes have never even been listened to. They are still gaffered shut, just the way they came off the road. And in order to log it, you've got to listen to it. And what intern is even going to know what he's hearing? And the mental notes that I have about what's on those tapes is not only what the tunes are, but where the good versions are. And your only other option to leaving the stuff scattered like that is to go through the arduous process of making logs of everything, clip the good takes out, collate them, and start yet another library. does it frustrate you that it's impossible to do all of these things as fast as you would want to? Frank says, yes. Let me put it to you another way. If I could, I'd keep my studio running 24 hours a day. For some of those things that need to be done on the studio level, I don't need to be in the control room with the engineer. I could just give instructions. And because the board is automated, once you've done a mix, if anything needs to be changed in the mix, all you've got to do is go back and tweak a couple of faders and rerun it, and no time is lost. But this engineer that I'm working with, Spence, is a mutant, because not only does he understand old analog technology, he's still a vinyl guy at home, and he's one of these guys that likes tube amplifiers and all that kind of stuff. But he knows how to operate all of the digital recording equipment. He understands the sonic solutions, and he can even operate that aspect of the synclavier that interfaces with the recording machines. In other words, I could leave him alone. I could say, quote, call up this sequence, do this, and this, unquote. And he knows how to run all these things. Now, there's not too many recording engineers that I know of that have a hands-on experience with all this gear and do it right. And he's got real good ears for balancing things. I would need 3 guys. I would need 3 guys like that in order to run 3 8-hour shifts in there. And I feel lucky that I can get him 4 days a week, 10 hours a day. But you know, at the end of the day, when he's got to go back to his wife, I'm sitting there going, quote, oh, well, we almost got that one done, unquote. It drives you crazy a little bit. But then on the other hand, if I were to just hire a bunch of guys to move the faders up and down, I wouldn't get the good result in quotes. And besides, all these people have very unique personalities. Todd is truly a unique and mysterious character. Same with Don Dorth, and the same with Chris Lou. And fortunately, they all get along with each other. It's very amusing to be in the same room with these 3 guys trying to have a conversation with each other. I really enjoy it. And that's the end of part 1. So that's a pretty good section.